What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Around the Crease, episode 82. This week we have John Odierna. He's the associate head coach at the University of Manhattan, and we're talking recruiting, and we're starting now. I'm here with Coach John Odierna. He's the associate head coach at Manhattan out of New York. Coach, thank you for joining the podcast this week. I really appreciate it.
Mike, thanks for having me on. Excited to answer some questions and hopefully shed a little light on the recruiting circuit.
Yeah, and I mean, I get a number of questions about it over past few months. Again, I've really kind of geared into getting people to give me what they think and what they want to know about various things. Some of it's a little bit surprising to me, but the number one question I have constantly gotten from people is, how do they know which events to attend? Obviously, there's a lot to choose from. There's a lot going on. I mean, you guys have to make all those same decisions about which events to attend. But if you're talking to a player or a parent, what kind of advice would you give them as far as how should they go about picking which events to attend?
Sure. I think cost efficiency is key for everyone, right? It's about managing time and your resources and finding the stuff that's going to be the best bang for your buck. So I do think doing some research on events, not all events are created equal. Yeah. There's going to be different coaches, different schools, different styles of events. Doing your research, these events love to brag about what schools are attending or who's been there in the past. So do a little research, see what type of schools have been there in the past. Maybe you have a certain type of school you're looking for. What does the event offer? Do they have a recruiting talk? Do they do instruction? Is it straight up games the whole time? I think that stuff's really important. And I think the big thing too is burnout is real. I don't think playing in every single event from the beginning of June to the end of July is conducive to your success on the field. We joke around as coaches, in July, by the end of July, I've seen the same kid play in 17 events, and he was a world beater in the first 3. And then by event 17, he can barely pick up his legs on the field. So, I do think that's something definitely worth evaluating. Try not to stack too many events on top of each other. 5 events in 5 days. You might come out hot early, and then by that last game of the last event, you don't have it. That might be the first time a coach has seen you play. So, I think the big thing with picking events is give yourself the best chance to succeed. If there's 2 events you really want to get to, if they're not back-to-back, try not to put something in the middle, or, if they are back-to-back, try to give yourself a break either on the front end or the back end to give yourself the best chance to play. So I do think that's key. And then the last thing I would say is, consider prospect days. I think if there are certain schools that you're really interested in, the best way to show that you're interested is to show up on campus and play in an event. If the coach has a prospect day, I know the amount of guys we've recruited over the years that we didn't even know who they were, and they showed up at a prospect camp, and, we look at each other like, did you invite that kid? Who is that? And, we meet about the guys after, and we're like, well, he just showed up. He's obviously somewhat interested in our program. So, that's a little bit different than showing up at I've heard you talk about in your other podcasts, the NHSLS is a huge event, and there's a million teams there. Any kid on any team, they could either be interested or not interested at all in my school. But if you're at a prospect day, I assume that everyone that shows up at our prospect camp is interested in my school. So,
right.
I do think those are a great way to show interest to a staff too, if that's something that you're open to and if it fits into your schedule. So,
yeah. And I mean, it's one of those things with the recruiting, I know the kids always like, I think, when September 1 now with the new rule, they like to get that first call and see the interest. But I mean, you guys want to see the interest, from the players as well. So it's that's that extra step of, coming to your prospect camp, because I hear various people asking about the camps and stuff like that, and I think that's easier for you guys to kind of identify these are the guys that are serious, these are the guys that want to be here. They've probably done it's a little bit of research on Manhattan or whatever school they're at, so you kind of get that little bit of leg up to be like, all right, this kid may be a little bit a few steps ahead of maybe where some of his peers are. And I mean, sometimes it's the little thing that can kind of put you that much further ahead of playing at a college and not playing at a college.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll use a success story. A guy on our team, he's a junior now, but he was a first-team All-MAC goalie as a sophomore, and he was a guy that we recruited, out of high school, where he was a goalie, and we were looking at a bunch of guys that we were trying to track down, and we had 3 prospect days, 1 in the spring and 2 in the summer, and he just kept showing up and kept putting himself on our radar, and we were like, I mean, he obviously really wants to be here. If he keeps coming back to these camps, this is a place where he wants to be. He obviously has decided that this is a school that he's really interested in, and we got to give him a serious look. And when it all shook out, he ended up being here, and all of a sudden he is a first-team All-MAC goalie. So,
yeah.
Had he not shown up to a couple of those camps, I don't know if we would have recruited him, in all honesty. And, I'm not saying that as a plug for Manhattan College prospect camps. I'm sure that story exists for every program in the country in some way, shape, or form. So I do think that's a great way to show interest. But on the bigger scale, to back it up a little bit, I do think, map out your summer, look at what events there are and where they are, and maybe pick 4 or 5, or, if you have your club team play in your tournaments, and maybe pick like 1 or 2 showcases you want to go to, 2 that you think you can show really well. Maybe it's a weekend you have off with your club team. Or if it fits, you guys might be playing in a tournament in Maryland and there's a showcase on Monday, Tuesday in Virginia, and you can get to it. Those are always good opportunities depending on what coaches are there. So, I think there's no shortage of opportunities as far as events, and realistically, I could go recruit every single day from June 1st to July 30th, except for the dead period in the middle for Division I. There's always something, but try not to do everything. You want to give yourself your best chance to succeed.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I recently posted, it was a quote like I did with Coach Petro from Hopkins. Like, I did the interview a few years ago, but I posted one of those little quote blocks on Instagram the other day, and it's the most obvious quotes. Like, if you're in front of college coaches, play your best, play your hardest. And everybody that made the comment, they're like, well, duh, kind of thing, like, why wouldn't you? But I think that kind of speaks a little bit to what you're saying, is like, burnout is real. Like, if you've done 17 tournaments, if you've done a tournament every week, like, you may be a little bit tired, and so you may not be at your physical best. And again, that, like you said, that might be the first time a college coach has seen you. So it may not be like, you don't want to play. Like, I don't think any kid goes out there and they're not traveling halfway across the country, or even like getting up in the morning to go spend all day in 98-degree heat in Baltimore in the middle of the summer to not play their best. But if you've been doing it every day or every week for an extended period of time, like, you're also human. Like, you're gonna wear out and wear down. So I think, like you said, efficiency, giving yourself the best opportunity to play your best and succeed and impress the people you're trying to impress. Which kind of actually just leads us into our second question. They've picked their prospect day. They've kind of identified the one. Maybe they've seen like, I'm interested in Manhattan, and they usually attend this event. Like, but then they got to take that next step. Is like, how do they get your attention? Like, how do they get the attention of a college coach? Like, what do they need to do to kind of take that step?
Sure. I think there's a variety of things, and I'll try to touch them all. But, I think first and foremost, athleticism and size jumps out. A guy can be standing on the sideline and he looks like a big, strong kid, and it's like, okay, wow, that's a big kid. I wonder if he can play. So I think there's some degree of that. Now, if you're not 6'4" and 200 pounds, that doesn't mean that you're negatively going to be evaluated either. That's just something that I can walk by a field and notice size. So that's an easy one on the surface. The next part, and this one's probably the most important, is lacrosse skill. Do you have stick skills? Can you shoot if you're an offensive player? Are you really one-handed? Defensively, can you guard? Can you pick up ground balls? What's your lacrosse IQ? Are you communicating with your teammates? Are you a guy, when I'm watching guys for our program, is this a guy that's going to help us be organized, or is this a guy that's just not going to say anything and let the chips fall? And I think you can separate yourself positively by showing off what you know on the field. If you're a guy that gets your teammates organized, I don't think there's a program in the country that doesn't want a guy that communicates at a really high level. We'll find a role for that guy in a lot of ways. So I do think that's a major positive and a chance to show off. If you understand what's happening, make it clear, make it obvious. I think that's a way to separate yourself beyond athleticism or size. And the next part of the lacrosse skills, do you make the right play? Are you a guy that's going to look for your own and dodge and then draw a slide, but then dodge the slide and then try to run through a third guy and hope that you can get a goal? Or are you going to be the guy that just makes the right play? Maybe you pick up a ground ball and you move it right away off the ground because that's the correct play, or you do draw a slide, but you're able to move it, not try to run through the slide guy. That's the correct play. I think coaches are constantly looking for guys that know how to play at a high level, and those are opportunities to show your skills. I think people often fall down the trap of, coaches associate, success with, it's got to be goals and assists every time. You'd be stunned the amount of times, the guy gets the hockey assist, or, he picks up the tough ground ball in the defensive end as a midfielder, gets the ball up the field, and that leads to transition. And guys look at each other like, I want the guy that picked up the ground ball. You know, the guy that scored the goal did the easy part. You know, and I think that that's something that gets lost in the shuffle a lot. So, you know, are you consistently making the right play? And then I will say this is the most important one. Do you have a motor? You know, to us as coaches, you know, we can teach you lacrosse skills, especially at the Division I level. We have so much time with our guys where we work on skills and techniques and schemes and concepts. You know, motor is hard to teach. Guys wanting to play hard, willing to make a tough play, willing to dive, willing to do something for the team. You know, I think those are the things that separate guys and will move you up a list. Maybe you're slightly less skilled than the other guy, but you can jump them by being a higher motor, higher energy player. And, you know, I think the one thing that I'll say is because we do have so much time with guys, high motor guys generally have higher ceilings in college because, you know, I'd rather take the guy that's good but will do anything to be excellent versus the guy who's great and is happy to be great. You know, I think that's, you know, the motor guy will push himself to be the best he can be over a 4-year career. And then the last part, you know, I think coaches evaluate everything. You know, what type of teammate are you? You know, are you spacing out on the sideline while your team's playing and your team scores a goal and you look and you're like, wait, what happened? I wasn't even paying attention. Or are you the guy that's like being pulled back from the bench because you're celebrating your teammate scoring a goal? Or, you know, a guy gives you an assist. Maybe you sting the corner, but rather than making it about you, you run right over, you give that guy a hug and a high five because he made the play for you. You know, I think those are the things that coaches, we're constantly evaluating. And, you know, we're trying to find the guys that we can either build our culture around or guys that will fit into the culture that we've built. You know, and I think that's a really important factor. Are you a guy that's spiking your water bottle on the sideline because you missed a shot, or you're slamming your stick while the ball goes the other way?
Yeah.
You know, I think those energy plays and those guys that are great teammates are guys that we are always looking for as coaches.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you mentioned, you know, the guy spiking the water bottle or slamming the stick, like especially the water bottle guy, because he's probably not on the field, and you know it's worth noting that you guys are watching everything. Like he might not be on the field, but if you guys have any inkling that might be a player, like you guys are watching everything they do. You're not just evaluating their on the field skills, but all those other little things. And that spike in the water ball, that could be the thing that be like, oh, maybe that's not the guy. Right. It's like, and
you know, you watch a guy a few times and you see like the stick slam and then the water bottle spike. Then he's yelling at his teammates. You're like, okay, well now we're starting to see a body of work here.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, maybe I don't mind a little passion. Maybe one water bottle spike. I've done
right.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, but I think you know, consistently being a great teammate will always put you in a better spot. So
yeah, I mean, again, we're human, and again, we're talking about, you know, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. Where, you know, I mean, I was an emotional guy when I was a kid. I'm sure, you know, when I was playing sports, like I probably beat myself up a few times for, you know, missing a ground ball or something like that when I was playing baseball. Like, you know, you drop an easy thing and you do it, but it's also how you respond to that. Like, does it continue to bother you? You're thinking about it the next, you know, on the next play, or you just, all right, brush it off, go on, congratulate your teammate, or are you showing a pattern there of, you know?
Honestly, that's a great point. Just to touch on that, because it's something we actually talk about with the guys in our program too. Is like, you know, maybe you do make a mistake and your reaction, instead of spiking the water bottle, maybe you go ride the ball back, or you know, maybe you come to the sideline, and again, we're on the sidelines a lot of times. You come to the sideline and, you know, something like, hey, boys, that's on me, but I got the next one. You know, that's something where as a coach, I might make a note and be like, wow, that's a really mature kid.
Yeah.
You know, he knows he made a mistake, but he's ready to move on. And, you know, he feels for his teammates, hey, I got the next one, guys. Trust me, I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's stuff that we coach guys on our team to do. You know, and the faster you can get that as part of your brain power and your repertoire, I think that's a good thing to have. So
yeah, and I mean, I hear it all the time from coaches. It seems like it seems to be the little things can make almost the biggest difference in recruiting. Because I mean, I've covered recruiting at various sports throughout my career, and you know, there's really probably not a lot of difference between the number 42 guy and the number 52 guy. There's you know, it's a 10-digit difference, you know, in the inside lacrosse rankings, but there's going to be a very thin line between like which is the better player. And so whatever you can do, like 52 can make himself a lot better recruit just by, you know, paying attention to the little things that you do and how you handle yourself and the way you're presenting yourself, especially when you're in front of the, you know, guys like you, in front of those, like, because you guys are seeing everything. Like people like to think to be like, oh, they missed this kid. Like, you guys, this is your job. Like, you guys probably don't miss a whole lot. Like, at least,
we try not to. We try not to.
And plus, you guys have your own recruiting stuff. Like, we won't get into all the specifics, but you guys are looking for certain things, I'm sure, as well. Like, holes you have in your team and things you're looking for, and like do you need a motor guy? Do you not have that guy that's going to be kind of the glue to be like, this is a guy that can really kind of bring the team together? Or do you already have that guy? It's like, all right, of course, I guess you can never have too many of those guys either. But
clone me a group of motor guys, and we'll teach them lacrosse. I'll take them.
Yeah, there you go. So we kind of talked about that, but again, one of the questions I get, and obviously it's for kids in a certain area, but for obviously with so many events in like Baltimore and East Coast, and I mean we're coming up into the fall season. I know the Philly Showcase is a big one coming up. So again, it's that corridor, 95 corridor. So for the East Coast guys, is it any different for players to get noticed on the East Coast versus the Midwest where I'm located, or the Southeast, or the West? Like, is that process any different?
Sure. What I'll say is, and I say this all the time, recruiting is a bit of an inexact science. So, I don't think one size fits all, and that includes geography. But what I'll say is yes and no. Where it makes a difference is guys on the East Coast generally will just have more organic opportunities to be noticed. And what I mean by that is, late in our season, or when our season wraps up, there's still high school lacrosse being played out here, and it's their season. So, we're not hopping on a plane necessarily to fly to California for some high school games, or at least not yet. But, for New Jersey or Long Island or even upstate New York, it's easy for us to hop on the road and, grab a Chipotle burrito and sit down and watch a couple games on the road. We'll schedule it out on Long Island where we might hit a 4 o'clock and a 7 o'clock game. So we catch extra games, and those are organic opportunities that, the recruit is not really doing anything extra. He's showing up in his high school regular season game, but we have an opportunity to get there. And, the unfortunate reality is most of the schools are located on the East Coast. So, I'll say that's where maybe it's a little bit different. There might be more organic opportunities, but, going back to the summer or fall recruiting circuit, if you are able to make it to showcases and you can play, the coaches will notice you. They're there to see the best players, and regardless of where you're from, there's no stigma. Well, he's from fill in the blank, non-hotbed. I don't know if he's good enough. If you're standing out on a field at any event, coaches will take note. I don't care if you're from Long Island, Chicago, Kansas, the Moon, doesn't matter. If you can play, we'll coach you. And now what I will say is, going back to that first talking point, is you might need to create some opportunities by finding events and picking events where you're going to get maximum exposure or exposure to schools that you're really interested in. But, you can create more of those opportunities in the summer. The schedule is a little more flexible. There are a lot of events, especially in the summer, sometimes in the fall. So you can kind of close that gap by hitting some of those mainstream events and getting in front of coaches. Because like I said, if you can ball, we'll recruit you. We don't care where you're from.
Yeah. And I'm sure it kind of you mentioned that first talking point, like the efficiency. Like if you're going to be in Baltimore, and I know we also talked about not burning yourself out, but, if you only have, not everybody's going to be able to travel, 3 months out of the year for that summer recruiting. But if you can get to like maybe a prospect camp and a showcase camp, and like you can do that stuff in like a 10-day span, depending on what your schedule allows, like you can kind of maximize that opportunity as well. Like, you don't necessarily have to just go for one event and then call it a day and then travel back. Like you can always kind of, a little bit of planning can kind of help you out in that process as well.
No question. Exactly. I think if you hit the tournament on the weekend and you can hit a prospect day or two, I've talked to kids, I've seen them at recruiting events from, one weekend I was in Maryland, and then a week later I was in Massachusetts, and I saw the same guy from California at both events.
Yeah.
They tell the story of, we played down at this event, and then Monday I hit this school's prospect camp in the Mid-Atlantic, and then Thursday I hit this prospect camp in New England. We did a little sightseeing on Tuesday, Wednesday, got off my feet a little bit, maybe didn't play lacrosse, and now I'm at my tournament with my club team on Saturday, Sunday. So I do think going into the summer with a plan, especially if you're from one of those non-hotbed areas, will help you maximize yourself a little bit. But again, I don't think being noticed is different. It's just a matter of maybe the number of opportunities to be noticed might be slightly different.
Yeah, and you might have to just kind of, like you said, create your opportunities when you have it. Like, again, it's kind of, seizing the bull by the horns kind of thing. It's like when you're in front of the guys, like play your best, do your best, and do those little things. Control the stuff you can't control. Like, you can't control where you live, you can't control what high school you play for if you live in the Midwest or the West. But when you're in front of you guys, like, that's the stuff you can't control. And then,
absolutely. And one other thing I will mention, you just stoked my brain here a little bit. I do think, if you're in one of those non-hotbed areas, use your club coach, use your high school coach. If you're playing for a club, part of their job description is to help you. So having your club coach reach out to some schools that you might be interested in and just, do a temperature check. And if they haven't seen you, hey, this is a guy that's coming to your area or he'll be at this event, really interested in your school, please just give him an opportunity. I don't know many schools in the country that have a guy interested, their coach reaches out and they're like, no, I'm not going to watch him. Most of the time coaches are like, oh, that's great. I'm not sure who that is, but if I'm there, I'll definitely watch him. So I do think using your club coach and even your high school coach as a lifeline there, and have him shoot an email. Hey, coach, so-and-so is going to be in this area. Hopefully you guys are making it out to the showcase at this place. He's really interested in your school. I think he's definitely worth a look.
Yeah.
We'll definitely put you on somebody's radar a little bit faster. That'll streamline your process. And, every time we get one of those, I'm like, all right, I better go see so-and-so from Georgia. I want to make sure that he's getting his money's worth. And if he's a guy we need to be seeing and the coach swears by him, I got to see him.
Yeah.
I do think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, every kid listening to this, or every parent should be listening to this. Like, you don't have to do it alone. Like you said, club coach or high school coach, like these guys, most of the coaches I talk to, like, they're more than happy to help the kids. Like, if you're like, hey, I really want to go to Manhattan, do you mind reaching out? Every little bit helps. Like, don't be ashamed. Like, don't feel like you can't ask. Obviously, it's one of those, like, no one's gonna fault you for that. Like, at some point, you're gonna have to do the recruiting yourself. You're gonna have to do it. You have to step up and be the person. You don't want to talk to the club coach or the high school coach the whole time, but any leg up you can, like, use all your opportunities, all your assets, everything you have at your disposal. It's just being a smart player, smart recruit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very important thing.
Yeah. So you mentioned, we actually kind of perfect segue into the next question is, at what point, because I know with the rule change, it's September 1st of their junior year before, like, you guys are allowed to contact players and talk to them. But, for, I know the 23s and the guys, like, how early should a player start trying to get in front of you guys, like, get your attention, even if it's just an email to say, hey, I'm interested in Manhattan, even though if you can't respond back, like, at what point should a kid kind of start trying to make that point of contact if they're interested?
Sure. So I'm going to go sideways for a second, and then I'm going to come back. I'm a Long Island Italian guy. I'm a tangent machine. I like to talk, so I apologize in advance, but at least I have the disclaimer that I'm going on a tangent. One. So what I'll say is, and I think I'll echo what most college coaches believe, the new rules are awesome. I think where they're unique is they allow, the guys that are freshmen and sophomores in high school to focus on developing and improving. You don't need to be at every recruiting showcase as a freshman in high school. That's a great opportunity to show up at events that have an instructional segment. We talk about putting tools in your tool belt. Maybe you go to an instructional camp or a camp that has an instructional component, and you're getting exposed to college lacrosse coaches. Well, they're going to teach you skills that college lacrosse coaches want to see when they're recruiting. So if you can expose yourself to events like that, especially kind of backing into the answer to your question, well, if there's an instructional component, it's a great opportunity to get to work firsthand with a coach at a school you might be interested in. So there is an opportunity to do that, and it's not really a loophole in the rules because it's under the guise of, we're playing lacrosse, we're teaching lacrosse, you're learning skills that apply to college lacrosse, but it is an opportunity for us to interact in a way that is legal by the new rule standards. So, we kind of get a feel for you a little bit, you get a feel for us. And then what I'll say is, as far as reaching out to schools, I think if you're a freshman, sure, if you want to reach out to some schools, let them know that they're on your radar, that's good. But, bear in mind that a lot of us at every level are still recruiting juniors, and some are even still recruiting seniors.
Yeah.
So if you're a freshman, you're not necessarily going to be the guy that's on the forefront of our brain. But if you want to reach out via email, I don't think that's a bad thing. Sophomores, I'll say that's a good time to start reaching out and just let coaches know, the facts. who, what, when, where, why. Here's who I am. Here's what position I play. Maybe what class I'm in. When are you playing? Where can I see you if I do want to watch? Where are you playing, and why are you interested? If you're interested in my school, I'm interested because of this major. I'm interested because of the proximity of New York City. Don't email me and say, I'm really interested in Manhattan College because I want to be in the middle of nowhere. That doesn't show that you really did a whole lot of research on my institution. And, as much as recruits want to feel like they're getting personalized emails, coaches feel the same way. We want to feel like you did research, you're interested in the school, there's investment on your end. You're not just Coach Odierna and every other Division I lacrosse school. I'm interested in your school. I really care about your school, but you don't mention the name of the school. You don't mention why you're interested.
Right.
You don't even mention my name in some of the emails. You will get the hi coach. I'm interested in your university. We're Manhattan College, so immediately the red flags go up. So I think, for any school, the best thing you can do is, as a freshman or sophomore, just say, hey, coach, I'm starting to look at schools. Yours is one that's of interest to me. Here's why, and I know it's early, but here's where I'll be playing. Here's my position, and here's a little bit about me. It doesn't need to be a novel,
right.
But, a little bit about who you are, why you're interested. I think that's stuff that coaches really care a lot about.
Yeah, and I think to your point, like when you're doing that kind of more personalized email and you show that you've done some research in the college, like, again, it's an investment on their part for you, but you guys are also investing something in them, and you don't want to recruit someone and then find out, like, oh, they don't really want to be here. They just maybe, and I hear it a lot, like it's D1 or bust. Like, if I don't go D1, I don't want to play lacrosse. And, that's, not to say there's not kids that you guys wouldn't take or some college wouldn't take that has that mentality, but then also it's like, well, you don't want to get them here and then find out, like, oh, they, this isn't the fit. Like, they didn't really want to be here. Like, yeah, they can play D1, but D1, that's a range. I mean, I went to Mount St. Mary's. That is very different from Ohio State. Like, not all D1 schools or the atmospheres are created equal in that respect. Like, you have a personality. Like, do you want small or do you want big or do you want middle? Like, there's factors other than just the level at which you want to play that will play into your decision making.
No question. And the other thing I'll add too, it's always good to add a highlight video if you have one. That's an opportunity for us. Maybe you're someone that isn't on our radar, especially if you're one of the younger guys. You're probably not right now. You might be, but more often than not, you're kind of popping up on our radar. You can include a highlight video too. That kind of gives us a quick glimpse into you as a player. And I think the thing that I always advise for highlight videos, and I think, I just like to mention, I like good music. Some coaches will say they mute it. They don't care. I like good music. So, throw on whatever good jams you got. I always appreciate that. We crank it up in the office. It's a good one. I always have the option to mute if I choose. So, it's a good chance to show a little bit of your personality there. I will say, if you're going to put music in, please use the edited version of songs. We don't need curses every 2 words. And then the other thing I'll say about that too, the highlight video doesn't need to be like a Hollywood epic film. No 10-minute film with, the 4-minute scroll about everything that's ever happened in life, and I've got to click ahead. I think if you want to put words in there about yourself, that's not bad. But let's move quickly through that. I could always pause the film and read what you're putting on there. It doesn't need to be 35 seconds of straight up words the whole way. I want to get to the meat and potatoes of the video. And I joke around about like the Hollywood epic film. It doesn't need to be, the introduction and we kind of learn who the characters are, and then we develop the story arc. And there's the rising action where some of your good plays, but it's not your best plays, and that works up to your climax at minute 9, and that's where the best stuff happens. For us as coaches, we want to see your best stuff right out of the gate. Your job shouldn't be to hope I watch until minute 5. It should be to hook me in minute 1. In minute 1, make me watch minute 2, because there are a lot of coaches in the country that they want to watch 1 minute and be like, I'm on to the next one. But if you hook me in that first minute, I'll be like, wow, okay, these are some really impressive highlights. Let me see what else he has here. I think that's really important. So don't build up to like the big finish, because you might lose the coach. Start with your best plays. If you're an attackman, give us a great goal, give us a great assist, give us a great ride right out of the gate. And be like, wow, this kid can play. I want to see what else is on here. Does he have an offhand? Let me see some of those.
Yeah.
Rather than here's some of my early decent stuff, and then I'm going to hit you with the good stuff down the road. I know a lot of coaches for us, time is everything. And if there's a kid that can play, we definitely want to watch. But help us out by leading in with your best stuff rather than hoping we wait till the end to see it.
Yeah, you don't need to put your career into a first act, second act, and third act like a movie. It's like, you don't need to see the character progression.
Yeah, exactly. After 10 minutes, I hit pause. I'm going to go grab a drink. I'm going to come back and watch the next 10 minutes. Let's get to that good stuff right away.
Yeah. And the other question I kind of wanted to ask about is social media. Obviously, we live in a day and age where social media, like Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, like it's all out there and all available. Like, what role should that play in a potential recruit's in their toolbox? Like, when should they use it? When should they not use it?
Sure. What I would say about social media is, like, in a way, that's kind of like your resume for us. That gives us kind of a glimpse into your life and how you communicate and what you're putting out there about yourself. And I'll say, our philosophy on it here is we don't tell our guys not to post on social media. Just be smart about what you're posting. When you graduate college, there's going to be a company that you're hoping to work for is going to have a person whose job is to seek through your social media and see if there's anything bad on there.
Yep.
Well, it's the same thing for us. We're not going to legitimately bring a guy on campus if we Google his social media and there's a bunch of stuff we don't want to see on there. We don't know if that's the best representation of our program. So, what I would say about the social media piece is don't be afraid to use it. Let's just be smart about how we're using it. If you want to retweet sweet college lacrosse goals, by all means, do it. That shows that you're fired up about college lacrosse.
Yeah.
And same thing with Instagram. If you're on vacation with your family, you should throw that on Instagram. I'm sure people would love to see that. But just be smart about what you're putting up there and how you're promoting yourself individually. Because like I said, that kind of gives us a glimpse into what are you all about and how do you promote yourself? Because ultimately how you promote yourself in high school will be how you promote our program when you get here.
Right. Okay. So that kind of almost a perfect segue into what non-athletic factors kind of feature heavily in the recruiting process?
Sure. I'll start with the obvious one, and that's going to be academics. The better grades you have, the more options you're going to have at the end of the day. Some schools, I will say on that subject, not to do a deep dive into this concept, but some schools will award academic scholarships. So you're doing yourself a favor by getting your work done in the classroom. You're setting yourself up for success. You make yourself more recruitable to more schools by having better grades. Now, upward trend is really important. Admissions departments aren't going to just hold it against you forever if you didn't have your best stuff your freshman year. But they do want to see improvement. They don't want to see all A's your freshman year, all A minuses your sophomore year, and then B minuses your junior year. They're going to be like, what's happening? This is not good. Yeah. Whereas if you show that opposite trend, as a coach, if we're going to go to bat for you, we can make a compelling argument with our admissions department. Well, hey, his best academics are actually still ahead of him. So I think that's a really important thing. Don't get discouraged if you don't have your best stuff early on in your career academically. But stay with it. Keep working. Schools will look at upward trends. And I would say this is kind of the eternal battle. Challenge yourself with honors and AP classes, but classes that you can do well in. An admissions department is not going to be impressed by a straight up course load of AP and honors classes if you got straight C's in those classes. They want to see you challenge yourself, but do well in the classes. So if you only can take 2 APs, but you're going to get A minuses in those APs, only take the 2 APs. You've got to challenge yourself, but be able to set yourself up to do the best you can. And then the last part about academics, I think every school in the country, regardless of our academic standards, we're looking for high-end academic students. And what we like to focus on here is guys that are motivated in the classroom are generally motivated in lacrosse and in other walks of life. It should be easier to be motivated in lacrosse than in school. And I think guys that are getting it done in the classroom generally are the guys that show up to practice with a clear head because they know they're on top of their academics. My old boss, Gene Peluso at Stevens Tech, he had a lot of really funny one-liners, but he would always say, we don't want you to think about lacrosse during chemistry class, and we don't want you to think about chemistry during lacrosse practice. And the same thing holds true here. We don't want you in chemistry being like, man, I got to get extra work in. I forgot to do this. I got to get this done for practice. I'm not going to be ready when I show up. We want the guy that is getting his extra work in, is showing up to class being like, all right, it's time for class now. I'm dialed into this. I'm going to crush this. And as soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to move on to the next thing I got to get to. So, a good success story, for example, one of our guys, a guy who's a captain since his sophomore year, he's been a 3-year captain for us. Last year, he was our leading scorer and was a 3.95 GPA. So, for us, that's a guy that he showed up to practice every day, knew what he needed to do to get done,
and knew how to go on and get his work done outside of lacrosse. And, we say it all the time. We don't want you thinking about investments while we're walking out on the field to play Navy. We want you worried about Navy when it's time to play Navy. So, I do think that's really important. Shifting gears in the non-athletic factors, I think this is a huge, huge one. Control your process. To me, this is a non-athletic factor. Throughout your recruitment, are we constantly trying to track you down through your parents, or are you a guy that's going to be on the forefront that's going to communicate with us? Because for us, that gives us an indication of what it will be like to communicate with you when you are on our campus as a college athlete here. Believe it or not, we meet with every single guy on our team every week, and no one's parents are showing up to campus for the meeting. We meet with you directly. We want to have a relationship with you directly. And it's just a good life skill. We ask our guys sometimes, are your parents going to call your boss if you're unhappy at your job? No, you've got to go to your boss. So here's a great opportunity to start working on some life skills. If you're interested in Manhattan, tell me why. I want to hear it from you. I don't want to hear it from your dad who thinks it's a good idea. You're not interested, but he thinks you should be interested. You can talk about that behind closed doors, but I don't want to talk and communicate with you directly. I want to hear from you that you're interested in our program. So I think that's a really important one. And I know a lot of people are nervous, when you're in high school, sometimes coaches are intimidating. We're guys too. We played lacrosse in high school. We played lacrosse before we were in high school for a lot of us. We were right where you were. This is a process that should be fun and exciting. There aren't going to be a whole lot of your times in your life where you've got men begging you to be part of their program. I promise you, no one begs me to do anything with them at this point in my life. I'm killed to be recruited again. So as much as it's a pressure-filled time, I think it's a fun and exciting time too, and it's a great opportunity to learn some stuff about yourself. Maybe visit a campus that you say, no way, I'm not interested in this type of school, and you go there and you hit it off with the coaching staff. You walk around, you're like, wow, I could really see myself here. Immerse yourself in that process. Be open-minded. I think that's something that goes beyond the scope of lacrosse. So controlling your process. We kind of touched social media. That's important. That I file under controlling controllables a little bit. And this one isn't so much a non-athletic factor. It's more of a non-lacrosse factor. Multisport athletes. I think those are really, really positive. A big thing about being a multisport athlete, you get a chance to compete for a championship when you're playing football in the fall, rather than just playing lacrosse all fall when the games don't really mean anything. I'd rather a guy get used to trying to be clutch and make plays in as many situations as possible throughout whatever sport, because that's the guy that we'll be able to lean on a lacrosse field when we need him to make a play. Because you know what? Maybe he had to hit the game-winning three-pointer in basketball rather than just hanging out during the whole winter. Or, on 4th and 1, they gave him the ball, and those opportunities, those are very hard to manufacture on your own. So playing multiple sports gives you an opportunity to learn different situations. And guess what? Our sport, what's great about it is it's a mix of a lot of sports. So if you play soccer, if you play football, if you play hockey, if you play basketball, there's almost a 100% chance you're going to take away a skill that will directly translate to something that helps you in lacrosse. We talk about dodging. A split dodge, very similar to a crossover in basketball. I think there's a lot of things that directly apply. And even the bigger one is you learn to play different roles. You might be the star of your lacrosse team. You might be just a guy on your basketball team. You might be the sixth man that comes in and gives great minutes, but you're coming off the bench. But you're going to be in the game. You're engaged. You're ready to play. You might play that role as a freshman or a sophomore in your college program. If you get recruited to a really good program, there aren't a lot of freshmen that get on the field right away. So I do think that's something that playing multiple sports gives you an opportunity to learn. And, obviously taking advantage of that and using those opportunities to learn a little bit about yourself as an athlete. And, sorry, I have one more for you, Mike, because I'm giving you my money's worth on this show.
That's what we like to hear.
Multi-sport athletes generally have higher ceilings when they get to college because they never focused on lacrosse full-time before. There's less burnout about our sport. I know guys that played only lacrosse and they get to college and they're like, all right, this is actually a harder version of what I've been doing for a long time. Whereas if you play football and basketball or you play just football, a lot of times when guys get the chance to focus only on lacrosse, their best lacrosse is still yet to be played in their life. So, I do think that there is a huge push positively among college coaches. We will always take a guy that's a multi-sport athlete. I would love for a guy that plays only lacrosse to be like, you know what, I'm going to try football as a senior this year. Or I'm going to try basketball. I'm going to see. And I might not touch the field or I might not get on the court, but I'm going to show up. I'm going to work my butt off at practice. I'm going to cheer on my teammates, because that is important. You've got to learn those skills, because in college, not every single guy starts every single game for all 4 years. There's just not enough. So I do think those are good skills to learn.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another thing that I find kind of unique about our sport is almost all coaches I talk to always they tout the multi-sport athlete. I mean, like I said, when I covered football, like, when you're done with football season, you started getting ready for the combine. Like that was your moment to shine. Like basketball, it's a year-round sport. Like they play basketball, when season's over, goes into AAU season and the travel season and stuff like that. I mean, not that they're lacrosse does have its summer recruiting stuff as well, but that's also unique about our sport too. Is there's not college football coaches, they can go to a high school game because they're usually not on the same day. You guys are playing a lot of those same games on the same days that high schools are, so you don't have that opportunity. But that multi-sport. I mean, you look. I mean, obviously every Super Bowl we hear about Chris Hogan. Who played lacrosse. Obviously, we may be hearing about Pat Spencer, who played lacrosse. One day. If his first game at Northwestern's any indication, if those highlights keep up. But I think it's another thing. Like those athletic skills, they translate, and I think that's great to hear. Like I had not heard a coach mention as far as the ceiling being higher with those guys because they hadn't focused bets. I think that's a really good point as well. So, I had a couple kids ask me as far as like the walk-on situation, like is walking on at a Division I thing, is that a thing? Is that a possibility for an athlete?
100%. I will say, I think at different schools that the process is different, but I would imagine that almost every Division I program has a walk-on their roster right now. If I had to guess, I haven't done the market research on it, but I'll speak directly to our program. We have 4 or 5 guys that were straight up walk-ons that showed up on campus and made lacrosse a big priority for them and told us that, it's something I really want to try and I want to figure it out. We had a guy from New Jersey that showed up as, I'm going to try out as an attackman 4 years ago. And we were like, well, we're pretty deep at attack, but we are pretty light with defensemen. You're a pretty good lacrosse player. If you're willing to play defense, you can stick around on the team. And the kid was like, I will literally do anything to be on the team. I don't care. Whatever I have to do, I can do it. So, here's a guy that we've been fortunate. We've had the number 1 man down unit in the country the last 2 years, but he's a guy that I put on that unit. I rewarded as a junior and put him on the unit, and now that's his role for us. And, that's a guy that, honestly, had he not even thought about walking on, wouldn't be part of that. And, I think a couple things I will say about it is, generally as a walk-on, a guy maybe that we're not aware of or we haven't seen or we don't know much about, there is a limited time that you'll have to try out. So you do have to try to move the needle a little bit, so to speak, a little bit sooner in your process. But, coaches are dying for guys to show up and be the next success story in their program. It exists. And then the other thing I'll say about that, just to mention, if you do want to walk on, it's a positive thing. But understand there's a pretty big commitment there. If you're a walk-on, you're going to be treated like a guy that was recruited and brought in on a scholarship. There's no different expectations just because you're a walk-on. Yeah. If anything, we had a guy who emailed us over and over and over for an entire summer. I want to walk on. I want to walk on. I want to walk on. First week of school, we meet with them to say, hey, here are the expectations. We practice during fall ball. We're Monday through Friday. We scrimmage on Saturdays in the spring. We're 6, sometimes 7 days a week. And the kid's like, oh, I didn't realize you played on the weekends. I'm not interested anymore. You've got to be realistic about the expectations. And that's not just a Division I thing. A lot of high level Division II and Division III programs function like Division I programs. So, just because you're a walk-on doesn't mean you're going to be treated any differently. You're going to be treated just the same. If you make that team, your expectations will be as if you're somebody that was recruited and brought there and a guy that's expected to contribute positively. And it might be being a great cheerleader on game day, or it might be eventually getting on the man down unit, and earning your way up the ladder. But, it's definitely a thing. I would definitely encourage guys to do it. There are success stories everywhere in the country every year. But just understand that obviously you're going to be held to a high standard. If you're a guy that's like, I don't know if I want to play lacrosse, it might be a little bit challenging. If you're a guy that's like, I can't imagine now being in college and not playing lacrosse, it might be for you.
Yeah. And I got to imagine, like, there's got to be something heartwarming for coaches to know that a kid, like, well, he came here not knowing he was going to play lacrosse, and he wants to play lacrosse. Like, so at least one thing, he wants to be at Manhattan. We got, you got that one thing going for him, rather than the kid's just like, I'll play D1, I don't care where it is. At least they got that going for him. But, I've had many coaches tell me, and not even just in lacrosse, in many sports, like you generally, like, you have your athletics, you have your academics, and you have your social life. And generally, you don't get all three when you're a Division I athlete. Like, something's got to give. Not to mean you don't get to be social at all, but, if you want to party on weekends, Division I athletics may not be for you, because you guys you'll be at games, you'll be at practice, or you'll just be too wiped between studying and stuff like that to
burning
feel like
the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
No
one wants the kid that's dragging on a Saturday afternoon game when you're playing Navy. Like, you don't want that kid.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, there's a major time commitment, and I think there's something really rewarding about it, and there's a reason why. When you leave, say you play 4 years of college lacrosse at a high level, Division I, II, or III, there's a reason why those guys are more hireable at the end of the day. And we're fortunate, we're right outside New York City, so I have the opportunity to speak and be around a lot of people that hire a lot, and they talk about they always look for athletes first. So there is something to be said for, it's going to be a grind. It's not going to be easy. But if it was easy, everyone would do it. Everyone would be a ACC athlete if it was easy and they could just pick where they wanted to go. So I think it would be I think it's a challenge, but it's totally worth it at the end of the day. Guys are really proud of themselves when they get to the end of the road, and there obviously is a lot of lessons learned during that time. It's a major time management piece, and finding a way to balance it and make it all work and have your fun. But at the same time, you're going to work hard, and you're going to be right back at it on Monday, and you got to be ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of wrapping up here, I'm going to say the number one thing, realizing there's not one thing. But what is the number one thing a recruit can kind of make themselves, let me rephrase that. What's the number one thing a recruit can do to make themselves the most recruitable player possible?
Sure. And, like I said, recruiting is an inexact science. So, it's a variety of things. There's not always one thing, and there's not always something that prevents you always. But what I will say, and I'll kind of go back to what I was saying before, one, everybody's situation is unique. The big thing that you can't do is don't compare your process to someone else's process. Your process is different. It's your process. I could go in our locker room and there'd be 41 stories of how they showed up at Manhattan College, and they'd all be probably a little bit different if I had to guess. But what I will say is, and I'll go back to kind of my big thing, I preach this with our team, controlling your controllables. You control your attitude, you control your effort. We talked about being a motor guy on the field. That's something that stands out. That goes beyond the scope of being blessed with 6'4", 200 pounds and an unbelievable ability to run fast. Do you control your attitude? Do you control your effort? Are you a great teammate? How you speak on the phone with a coach. Are you a guy that acts like you can't be bothered? Or are you a guy that, if you agreed to get on the phone, are you excited to be on the phone? I think that's something that we evaluate as coaches. I want to hang up the phone and be like, I cannot wait to get this kid on our campus because I love that kid. And listen, you're getting to know us, and I understand there's a certain level of nervousness and uneasiness. But try to come out of your shell a little bit. That's going to be part of being at college, is you're going to have to come out of your shell a little bit. And you're just starting to expedite that process earlier in your life. And I want to hang up the phone and be like, wow, that kid was impressive. That will move you up a list. How do you write an email? Do you have typos everywhere? Do you email, I know he was on your show a couple weeks ago, Coach Zolchanik at Wagner. Hey, Coach Zolchanik, I'm interested in Manhattan for these reasons. That's something that you can control, and control that stuff. How you act when you come on campus, when your parents talk, do you roll your eyes behind them? That's something that stands out to a coach. Like I said, we evaluate everything. How are you really respectful? Are you excited? Coach, this is my mom, this is my dad. We're so excited to be here. I think that's stuff that stands out to us. So, obviously being able to shoot the ball 150 miles per hour with both hands, being able to run a 4.340, those are all things that are awesome. But any coach in the country will appreciate a guy that is really motivated, really excited, plays really hard, knows how to write an email, is happy to communicate with you, is excited to be on your campus. I don't think any coach, no matter where they are, is going to be like, you know what, that guy can't fit here.
Yeah.
I think coaches will find a way to recruit guys like that in most cases. So that would be, I guess, the number one thing is control what you can, and be realistic about where you are. And you know what, if you reach out to a coach and they say, hey, we're done with our class, well, let's move on to the next school. There's a ton of schools out there. There's a school for literally every kid that wants to play college lacrosse.
Yeah.
There's the top schools in Division I to schools that are starting up in Division III. They're everywhere in between. there's a school for you. So, control your stuff and be open-minded would be the other thing I'd say. I told you earlier, offline, I played at Gettysburg College. That was a school. I grew up in Long Island. Earlier in the early 2000s, the Division III realm was not as popular, not as well known. And, I looked at a bunch of Division I schools. I spoke with a bunch of Division I schools, and I ended up going to a Division III school in the middle of nowhere. And it ended up being a great experience for me, and had I not been open-minded and at least willing to hear what they had to say, I would have never ended up there. I would have been like, I'll just go somewhere else, So, controlling your controllables and being really open-minded and open to, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll go visit the campus and see, and maybe you show up and you hate it, or you go, wow, this just really impressed me. It's not what I expected at all. So I promised you I'd be long-winded. I think I accomplished that, and I think I followed through for you there.
Yeah, I think you did. I think you did a great job. So, Coach, thank you for being on. But before I let you go, tell people, where can they follow you guys and follow Manhattan online? Where should they go and check you out?
Sure. So obviously our school website, gojaspers.com. Obviously you can find all the information about our school. On Instagram, we're at Manhattan_lacrosse. And on Twitter, we are at Manhattan MLAX. So, we're blowing it up every once in a while. It's a little bit of a quieter time for us, but, if you want to see some drills and learn about some of the guys in our program, and see some sites from around campus, you can find us there.
Yeah, and I will have links to everything as well, so everybody can kind of check you guys out. So, Coach, I cannot thank you enough for being on this week's podcast. Thank you so much, and you have a great evening.
You got it, man. I appreciate you having me. It was really fun.